Hello, I'm Bill O'Donnell, and welcome to another program on spirituality. Today is a special program. We're going to commence on a two-part program to remember our friend and mentor Pedro Ribera Ortega, who just recently died on the 7th of January 2003. And to my left, I've asked to come in Brother Brian Dabowski of the College of Santa Fe and the Institute for Spirituality, and Dr. Tony Rippo, who was also a friend of Pedro's. And all of us had the honor of serving with him on the board of the Santa Fe Institute for Spirituality, where Pedro gave liberally of his time with enthusiasm to teach all that wanted to come the wonderful history of New Mexico and of the church and the way he blended it in with all of it. So we're here to remember an old friend and to share with you some footage that we've taken over the years with Pedro, and we hope that you'll enjoy. So if you know anyone who's at home and you think they might want to see a little bit of Pedro Ribera Ortega, call them up right now and tell them to turn on the television, and they'll get a chance to see just a little bit of what we've enjoyed over all these years. So welcome, Brother Brian and Tony. Good to have you.
Thank you.
Before we get started here, tell us a little about your relationship with, because you've probably known him longer than either of us. And, how did you first meet Pedro, and what's he been doing for the Institute?
Well, Pedro ran for many years our program on the Native American and Hispanic spirituality. And because he was both Native American and Hispanic, that he had all of that background in his family, as many people in New Mexico have. Mm-hmm. And because his ancestors went back to the beginning, and because everything that had happened over the past 400 years was immediate to him, it was just right there.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, he lived all of those things. Yeah. When we began to do this, we asked him to give some presentations. So he would give a day, then he would give another day, and we eventually provided him with an entire week. And during those weeks that he produced all of this information for the people, we had so many who had enjoyed it so much that we realized we wanted to continue this.
Well, Tony, how about you? What is your remembrances of Pedro?
Well, actually, I related to Pedro in several different ways. One is that he was a neighbor on the east side, and the first time I met was actually through Brother Brian, who Pedro knew the history of just about every house in a who knows how many square mile area. Yeah. And came over to the house for dinner and sort of filled us in on the history of the east side, and also knew the house and the people that owned it, for many years in the past. The second was through being a board member of the Institute for Spirituality. And lastly, being a neighbor, I had sort of a close relationship with him during his illness. And he's just a remarkable person who's very, certainly an inspiration to me, and someone to aspire to live the type of life Pedro lived.
Well, both Brother Brian and I were last Friday. We're sitting shoulder to shoulder at his funeral and at St. Francis Cathedral, and Father Jerome, if I'm not mistaken, literally called him a hero. That he was a hero to his people with all his dedication to promoting the history of this area. It was phenomenal, and we're hoping that if you like some of the footage that we're going to show you, I taped myself in 1994, I believe, the tapes we're going to see a whole week of Pedro, but as anybody knows who runs a camera, you don't get to hear it quite as well. So in preparation of this, I was just feasting on his teaching, and I hope that you'll enjoy it yourself. So I think by way of introduction, I think I would direct you to the New Mexican of the nice article here that they put on New Mexico scholar Pedro Ribera Ortega passed away. I'm trying to think what day that was. That was, I believe, last week. So you can look it up, and we'll give you that. I believe it was on the 9th, January 9th of '03 was the article, and with the behind it was the obituary. And then the New Mexican also did on the 10th of January of 2003, they did a Pedro Ribera Ortega was a cultural campeador, and something that you don't often see when a newspaper puts down as an editorial remembering him. So the first piece of tape I want to show you was his beloved historic Las Truchas Historical Center, where he had somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000 books and articles and different things, and this should last about 6.5 minutes. So let's just take a look at Pedro Ribera Ortega showing us his Truchas Historical Center, and I think you'll get a flavor of the man by seeing him in his own life.
We are at Pedro Ribera Ortega's house.
Welcome.
His house.
Oh, yeah. There's, I brought in the plumbing water from the street, and this was the commercial center of the village, and we need to leave it back. They said he's not here, so they buried what little gold they had somewhere. Well, one day I was here, and my brother got taken out with the Saturday, and my plumber in your here, the steps in my bathroom, he must have found a cache of gold at silver. And he got so excited, he left all of my doors open, and that night I was robbed royally. Yeah. Whole museum pieces, for example, a whole box of little tiny cups, what do you call them? Cups for Demi-tasse. Gifts of the Empress of France.
Oh.
They were all stolen, and they were sold, all of that stuff was sold for a couple of bottles of wine.
Oh.
So, but they dawned on me, he must have found something and left quickly, and and he went to Nevada and gambled it off and never said a thing. Now I have ghosts that come into this house because right next to my house is the dance hall of the village, and 3 men were killed outside my house, and they come periodically to ask for prayers. Because we have a firm belief that if you die in not having fulfilled your destiny, God will allow you to come back and ask for prayers. So I can be seated in that front room, like today, and I can feel them around me. So what I do, Grandma was a very holy woman, she said, put a glass of water on the table, Mito, refreshment. It's prayers for purgatory. Then kneel down and pray, and light a candle to the saints of Truchas. So please, scatter through my house and enjoy yourselves.
I hope they're not here today.
No, they were not. Grandma's family. His girlfriend was with him when he offered it to me because he died on me. And I said, well, I don't know whether his family knows that he was even mine.
Yeah.
No, the family said, it's yours, Pedro. And I said, well, I will give it in his honor and in honor of the First Center of New Mexico for the church. And they will incorporate it into their new church. And it's appropriateness. This is the patron of fishermen. This is fishermen's country. Our Lady is the patroness of the Americas. St. Joseph is the patroness of Trampas, where we were just a few minutes ago. Santa Barbara is the patroness of the other village. So the 3 villages, and this is one very popular, Our Lord, as the Christ child. So all of this combined very definitely means northern New Mexico. So it fitted beautifully. The family knows that it's yours, take it up there, and do whatever you want with it, but it's yours. So I said, well, the church was going to commission someone to do something like this. I said, I'll give it to you if you'll accept it in the name of the Santeros of New Mexico. And this up here is the collection, the great books of Spain. It's called the Western Collection. and it's philosophy, history, theology, you name it. And he said, there's 400, there's more books that come with it. And that was a gift to me when Juan Carlos was crowned King of Spain. And welcome to my simple adobe. Where this was, for example, this is San Miguel Mission, the beautiful Reredos there. But our people said, if they can have something like this, so can we. So each village had its own. These were the santos that were stolen, the first successful, what do you call it? Robbery on San Miguel, and these 4 paintings. And Our Lady went to bring him back. St. James the Apostle, our first teacher, on the little river where there's a few trout. So that is the symbolism of the village. And if Father would say a mass here in honor of the patrons of Truchas, I'd be very proud.
Is it Romero?
I did tell what
Pedro?
Huh?
That's Romero? No?
Yes, Archbishop Romero is one of my great heroes. And the man next to him is the man, our pastor and relative of mine, that was disemboweled for stealing the sacred host, Father Reynaldo.
From El Salvador?
No, from Santa Fe. He's the rector of the cathedral.
Oh, the one you were telling us
Yeah,
about?
that's the man.
Was your
That's our
cousin?
39th martyr. We call him the martyr of charity.
Did you know Romero?
And no, I've read everything about him that I've gotten my hands on, both in Spanish and in English. And his cause is very definitely promoted because Rome realizes he is a good model for all of Latin America. And it's all of the necessities.
All right, that was a little brief look at Pedro, his historic building in Truchas, where he has created a research center that I know Brother Brian's been there many times, but Tony has never been, and it's an extraordinary place to go. And if you're a scholar on New Mexico history, you could really learn a lot of that place, I'm sure. What are your remembrances of that? You've been there numerous times, brother.
Right. Pedro pointed out to us that it included part of the old wall, that it was built into the old defensive wall at the time when that was a fortress. You know, all of those northern villages were set up for that purpose, to interdict the passage of the Indians. And the people who lived there had to be pretty tough. They had to fight mano a mano, hand to hand with the Indians, because they weren't allowed to have any firearms. That would be too tempting for the Indians. So all of this, this history was what he was conveying to us, and the sense in which the people who had been fighting so hand to hand in the past had joined forces in the more recent times. For him, that meant 1693.
Yeah. Show us tell us what these books are that you have that Pedro wrote, if you can.
Right.
Which ones are they? You can hold them up.
Pedro has quite a few that have been published in public, but he also has some that he did in private, and these can be obtained through the Spirituality Institute. This is one on Our Lady of Guadalupe.
This is more information on the image and history of La Conquistadora, Pedro Ribera Ortega, Millennium. He wrote that in 2000.
Right. And then he has several hundred saints and their spiritual background. See here. And that's a 3-volume publication. So he has several of these that were privately published for scholars. They were very important publications from a historical standpoint. Yeah. And many of these are the ones that are the reasons why people in Spain considered him so important, because he was communicating to everybody what had happened and the things that had not appeared in the history books.
Well, let's go back. We have another tape that I want to show that where Pedro was actually teaching at the Institute for Spirituality at the College of Santa Fe in the summer of '94. And this particular segment will talk. He starts with talking about Peralta and the importance of him to Santa Fe, and ends up with explaining his definition of what really a New Mexican is. So sit back and enjoy the next 8.5 minutes of Pedro Ribera Ortega teaching at the Institute for Spirituality.
Founder of Santa Fe, This was the third capital. Was a man named Peralta from Navarra, way up in the mountains. And for years, we New Mexicans, we Santa Feans, have completely ignored the man. We didn't even have an alleyway in his honor. And yet we are a people that, for some reason or other, we get so busy with details, we really forget sometimes the important things. It's human nature. Well, the founder of Santa Fe, finally we resurrected the man, is a name called Pedro de Peralta. He was the third governor. He came with specific orders to establish Santa Fe, 1610, this date. Now we know that it was established earlier than that. And here in Santa Fe, we have a tremendous art colony, and every once in a while they think that abstract art is better than graphic art. And I was on the Arts Commission at the time fighting them about this particular monument that they were going to raise. And I said, the Hispanic people of Santa Fe do not consider Pedro de Peralta an abstraction. He was a real man. He came to do a job, and he lived in 1610. So you can't give us a monument that is a piece of art, abstract art. So I finally pushed and made many enemies. And this is the monument to Peralta. It's heroic in size. If you go downtown, right to the south of the post office, you'll see this. And an interesting story, the man who made this is a very famous sculptor, Dave McGarry from Reynosa, where your mother lives, or what? He's a tremendous sculptor of Indians, of the Plains Indians. But he had never done a piece on Spanish colonial piece. He took this, he won the commission for this. We gave him $125,000. He said, I'll add 50 more thousand to make it bigger. And I said, well, go down to El Paso to see a man named Jose Cisneros. Jose Cisneros was a little Mexican kid during the persecution in Mexico, had to come from Mexico to El Paso. He was only 7 years of age. And he liked to draw. He became one of the world's greatest interpreters of our people, of our horse and our costumes. When you say Jose Cisneros, you're dealing with the very best in the world. As a matter of fact, he just gave to the University of Texas at El Paso 2,000 of his etchings. I collect anything about him. Anyway, I said, go down and ask him what might a Peralta look like. What did the horse wear, so forth. And this is the, you know, now everyone likes it. But I had a difficult time to convince them that we needed something that meant something to us called being honest with history. Because Albuquerque had already given us a good example. Albuquerque's founder in Old Town Plaza is the founder, one of our governors, and they did a beautiful, beautiful heroic statue like this, a man on horseback. And that represents the founding of Albuquerque, 1760. I said, we want the same thing, because I want this to be a teaching tool. I said, when Albuquerque dedicated their monument to their founder, they had doctoral theses written, they had master's theses, they had a sculpture, they had units for children, elementary, junior high, high school, and college. I said, this is the same thing for this man. And if you go down to see the statue near the post office, besides the statue in this heroic, beautiful piece of the Arabian horse in all its glory, there's a piece of a monument that what I consider is important. And it's what it is. It's a resume of the document that says established Santa Fe. Huh? These are the rules, including being nice to the Indians. And then all around the frame are what we brought. We brought the horse, we brought cattle, we brought sheep and goats and pigs, wheat and grapes, all kinds of things. In other words, this was our civilization, riding and so forth. So if you have a chance, if you're downtown, around the plaza, enjoy the plaza, then go down to the post office, it's only 2 blocks down, and see this. This is uniquely beautiful. It's also uniquely honest. This is the man who had the obligation by law to establish this city called Santa Fe. Who were our spirit? This is the political side. Who were our spiritual leaders? The Franciscans. Those are the people that forbade us to marry the Pueblo women. No? It's interesting. I can go to any part of Mexico or Central America or South America, and I will find a mestizo world. Someone said, well, why? I said, well, look at it this way. When Columbus brought us to the New World, 1492, and he stumbled on the Americas, he even gave him a name called the Indies. It was named America after Amerigo Vespucci, one of the map makers. But I said, imagine in 1492 we came to this area, we stumbled on the Americas, and we as Hispanics had already been the very proud people of 9 races. So we are the only people in the world, perhaps, in the sight of God, that have absolutely no reason to be prejudiced. If we are, we're not going to get to heaven. We can't, because we're making a lie of Christ. Christ said you must love everyone. Well, for example, before Columbus got here, from Africa came the Iberians. We are very African. Adobe is very African. The guitar is very African. Many of our bad habits and good habits are African. Huh? Napoleon didn't like that. He said, you Spaniards are only African, you're not European. We told Napoleon, we don't like that. We are both. You're only Sicilian. And he didn't like that. That's why he sent his drunken brother to be our king, and we kicked him out. We celebrate May the 2nd every year, saying we got rid of the French in Spain. Mexico does the same thing. We call it May the 5th. But anyway, that's politics. But anyway, the Iberians from Africa, and then came the Celts from France. We consider the Irish and the Scotch people our baby brothers. We are the same people. If you don't believe me, Valladolid and Madrid and Salamanca 10 years ago celebrated 450th anniversary of colleges that exist today to train Irish priests and merchant people. That was our way of getting even with England, and also saving the faith in Ireland and in Scotland. The Irish, I don't think they're taught that, but someday they do, maybe when they get to heaven. The Celts that's that, right? Then we had the Greeks, we had Carthaginians, we had Phoenicians, 3 types of Greeks. Then we had the Romans, then we had the Visigoths, and then the Moors again. So at least 9 races that we took the best from them and discarded what we didn't like, came to the New World. And then in the New World, what did we find? 3,000 tribes of absolutely beautiful women. And we were going to say no? Come on, God would punish us if we say no. At any rate, this is what we came to the New World. We are an interesting people of many races, of many cultures, and that's probably why we have such bad habits. And we can go on, thank you. And we are very happy to be here. This is part of our story. From Spain to Cuba, to Columbus, Cuba, then Mexico, and then New Mexico. And once we got here, like our Roman legion, they abandoned us. We could not go back to Mexico. So if we are called archaic Spaniards, in that sense, it is true. We are called Spanish Mexicans. It is true. But the only term that I like, that I think is honest, is New Mexicans. It covers all of it. Okay, let's take a break.
Well, it just tickled me to see this again. You guys probably saw this for the first time. What was your impression of Pedro? His enthusiasm that comes across, and his love of history.
Absolutely marvelous, and the difference is that while we read history, he lived it.
Now, he was always so great in sharing himself and the stories with everyone that we just ask. Yeah. But during the pause, I asked Brother Brian if he'd heard the story of the treasure of the fort. And after our last board meeting, the retreat that we had up at the Sangre Cristo Retreat Center, we were in the car, and he said, when I bought the property, he said the history was this place, it was a fort as you described, and there was a tradition that the money box was hidden somewhere. And so as soon as he moved in, people would come and ask him, well, Pedro, did you find the money box? And he said people kept asking me that. And then silence. And so I said, well, Pedro, what about the money box? He said, the plumber found it.
Oh, that's right. I do remember that. Yeah.
Anyway, but he had a great sense of humor.
And he took off and went on a tear or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But the real blessing here and the real treasure was this man as a teacher. As a former high school teacher myself, I couldn't imagine having someone teaching this course with the kind of enthusiasm and the living it as opposed to just being an academic principle. And that's what he brought to us. So if you just joined us, we've been remembering Pedro Ribera Ortega, who passed away on January 7th of 2003 here in Santa Fe. And we're just very thankful to have known Pedro and to been the beneficiary of his teaching. If you've liked what you've seen, be sure and set your VCR for next week at this time, because we plan to come back in and share more segments, different segments that Pedro taught to us at the Institute over the years. So that'll be next week as well. So just in a couple minutes left, any final thoughts, Phil, next week?
Well, one of the things that Pedro didn't mention is that he himself was quite a mixture of peoples. He had Apache in his background. His grandmother was from San Ildefonso. And the people living here among the Native Americans really did take it to heart. You know, these are human beings like everyone else. We intermarry with them. We respect and reverence them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to say that, you know, had I not come here, one of the blessings of coming here is that I rediscovered, or actually discovered the first time, my faith as an adult. And just being around people like Pedro, when you see people that live it and it's part of their life, you know, sometimes modeling it is better than teaching it. And I found no better teacher, the combination of, and being accepted too. He was very open. He realized, like you heard in that tape, that even my ancestors, the Celts, and it is the Italians, were always welcome here. And the faith was what brought us together.
The thing that really strikes me about Pedro is that when I first came here, and I've been here for 9 years, and someone mentioned to me at actually Montez, a store in Santa Fe that sells religious items and retablos. They said, well, if you really want to understand this area, you have to understand this, and you have to understand Catholicism as it's practiced here. And I would say Pedro is the embodiment of that. And in that sense, he's the embodiment of this whole culture. And it's just a great pleasure to know him and to just to be in his presence. He's a remarkable person.
So we just have a few minutes left in this segment, but we want to remind you to tune in next week at this time, or set your VCR. We plan to show some more segments of Pedro teaching. And if you like what you hear and you want to hear more of his teaching, we have some rough tape of this, and we welcome your support. That we'd love to get it professionally edited so that we could put it on the air and that everybody could enjoy his teachings at home. I have this feeling that while he was alive, that people took him for granted and appreciate him, and now he's gone. But through the miracle of videotape and Brother Brian's work at the Institute for Spirituality, we captured some of this, and we'd love to share it with you. So watch the credits, and if you'd like to help us preserve this legacy for future generations, we'd like to do it for you. We just, if we get your help, we're going to do it. So we'd like to hear from you. So watch the credits, give us a call, or write us, and let us know how we can do this better, and we'd like to show more of it at a future time. So on behalf of everybody here at Spirituality, I want to thank you for viewing, and stay tuned next week at this time for part 2 of Remembering Pedro Ribera Ortega.